Hello, sixth graders. Today we're going to be taking a journey through a number of Dakota artifacts. All of these have come from some sort of animal that we have looked at in the classroom. Please be paying close attention because there will be some questions about some of the artifacts that you have seen. This artifact is a buffalo horn. It was a good material for making a number of things that the Dakota could use. Once it was removed from the buffalo, the soft, yellow, spongy stuff inside was removed so it wouldn't rot, and then they could use it for something like drinking water or any type of container. They would have to dry it for a number of days so it would be clean, and it was a very good tool for carrying or drinking out of.
Okay, so if you remember, they used every part of the animal that they possibly could. These are buffalo bone horses. They are made from the buffalo foot bones, and these were a toy for the kids. They would play different games with them. They would use the bone horses to do hunting games, and girls would make little packs and make travois for their bone horses.
This is a buffalo bone flesher. It is part of a leg bone from a bison, and it would have been used to remove any fat or any excess meat from the hide of a buffalo. The strap is from a hide that has been tanned, and it would be wrapped around the hand so it would be easier to hold when you are fleshing the hide of the buffalo.
Ready? Okay, this is a bowl made from buffalo horn. The way they would make it is they would boil the horn so that it would get softer. So if you remember, we saw the horn a couple artifacts ago. So this is flattened out a little bit more, and it would be used either as a spoon, it could be used as a drinking cup, or a serving ladle. They also later on used other animals' horns for that same thing.
This artifact is a buffalo bladder, and we all know what a bladder does in humans and animals. This one is used as a sewing kit, and inside it would have quills from maybe a porcupine that they could sew with, but the bladder would have been probably smoked, probably boiled to clean up, and a lot of times they would use this bladder as a canteen to haul water.
Okay, this is a buffalo hair on bag. So it is the buffalo wool. Buffalo don't have fur, it's wool, so they don't shed. So it was really good for making different things like these kind of bags. So it opens up, you could store things inside it. They also used the buffalo hair for making ropes, stuffing pillow, making pads for their saddles, or making ropes.
So this is a deer hide, the raw hide. This could be used for blankets. This could be used for clothes. And once the hide was removed from the deer, we did discuss the buffalo bone flesher. So more than likely the Dakota women would turn this thing down on the ground, and they would scrape this bone flesher to get any excess fat or any excess meat off the hide.
Okay, this is deer sinew. It is kind of the tendon inside connective tissue in their muscle, and it peels apart so that they would use it for thread for sewing. They also, so a deer sinew was about 18 inches long, elk was about 24 inches long, and the buffalo was about 30 inches long.
All right, here we have a deer rawhide. First, we talked about this earlier, the hide would be removed, and then once the hide was removed, they again would use this bone flesher. They would have to soak this in water, get it nice and warm, and more than likely the Dakota women would then scrape off any of the excess meat. This would be good for moccasins, and it's very stiff, maybe like drums, but it would be very stiff until it was tanned with the brain.
Okay, so this is rawhide that has been tanned. So if you remember, rawhide is really stiff. They would use it to make the containers and things out of. This is really soft. This would be made, used to make clothing, used for the teepee sides. And so the way you tan a hide, you take the animal's brain, you boil it for about 10 minutes till it becomes kind of mush. You'd make it into this mash. You put it on the hide, you leave it sit overnight, put a second coat on the next day, put some warm towels on it or some kind of to keep it a little bit damp overnight, and then afterwards it is smoked. over a fire so that it dries it out. Every animal has a brain the size that can tan its own hide. So a deer brain tans a deer hide, a mouse brain would tan a mouse hide.
The parfleche. A couple artifacts ago, we talked about the deer rawhide. The rawhide would have been used to make the parfleche. The parfleche could be made into basically any shape, an envelope, maybe a box, maybe a cylinder, and it would be used to store anywhere from personal belongings to food to anything that might be carried. And you can tell this is a Dakota by the design. Remember, the Dakota designs are symmetrical with the squares, the rectangles, and things like that. And basically, when they did color it, they only had the primary type colors.
So this is a buffalo bone paintbrush. It is made from the bone of a buffalo shoulder, and it was soaked into paints. It's really porous, so it would hold the paint. They would brush the different colors, like on the parfleche or on the sides of the teepee or any decoration they were doing.
Here we have a set of baby moccasins. Most every American Indian group tribe had what was called moccasins for their feet. The bottom would be the rawhide, and it'd be a little stiffer. This would be the tanned hide, the sides, for an infant. And the beads they would have got later once the fur traders got to North America. But you could tell these by the designs, the symmetrical shape, you can tell these are Dakota.
Okay, I've got a few bags here of porcupine quills. So this is a porcupine quill that is the color that it would be in nature. I have a few other bags. I have some that are dyed red, some that are yellow. This one's more of a kind of a maroon, so they would have been dyed with maybe berries or things like that they would find in nature. Porcupine quills were used for a lot of things. One was for needles, for sewing. If they were some of the really long ones, a porcupine quill is really pointed at one end, so they would use it for sewing. They also used it as decoration on dresses, on other types of things like jewelry. They used it for embroidery, and they often would flatten the quills by using their teeth to flatten them so that they would be easier to poke through things.
This you probably recognize. This is corn or maize, and the Dakota would have planted 3 crops. They would have planted the maize, squash, and beans together, and it's known as the 3 sisters. Together, this food constitutes a nutritionally complete diet, and when grown together, stop that. This is maize or corn, and this was a staple food during the summers. Remember, the Dakota would live in one place all summer long. They would plant maize, they'd plant beans, they'd plant squash, and that's what would sustain them over the winter.
Okay, this is a snowshoe that would have been the traditional size. The frame of it is made typically out of white ash. That is a really hard wood. And then the lashings are made out of rawhide. It is meant so that you strap these onto your feet and it keeps you on top of the snow so that you don't sink in. The men would use these in the winter for hunting so that they could go through the snow where the animals would sink into the snow and they would fall further into the snow. These you'd keep on top.
This is the many tools the Dakota would have used. These 3 here are made from animal bones. The rest are made from some kind of rock. Up here we have an obsidian knife. It has an antler from a deer, and it is fastened with some sinew. Here we have some arrowheads made out of rock. This is an obsidian arrowhead, and these are made from animal bones. Here we have an awl, and that would be used for sewing, where you would poke a hole through the hide to put the sinew through. We have another bow and arrowhead, and this would have been attached to a spear. Here are 2 hides from a deer we had saw earlier. What is the difference between these 2 hides? Another artifact we had seen earlier. What is this? A third artifact we had seen earlier. What is this? A fourth artifact we had seen earlier. What is this? A fourth artifact we had seen earlier. What is this? And the 5th article we had seen earlier. What are these?